Good afternoon, folks. This is Bob from BBD on this Thursday, the 20th of August. Some few news items. The first one is Apple becomes first US company to hit $2 trillion market value. Put it in perspective, folks. We were supposed to be a $2.5 to $3 trillion economy this year, with a possible shrinkage of 35 to 40%. Our GDP might just be the same as valuation of just one company, Apple. Putting things in perspective. The second one is PM says railways to develop 25 intermodal stations with road, port, ministry. That's interesting. If it's done right, like I said earlier, railways is your biggest economic multiplier and can attract a lot of investment. The important part here is, see, India is infrastructure deficient as opposed to China, which is infrastructure surplus. But in order to get this thing going right, India needs a lot of money, which we don't have. The only way we can do is liberalize the bond market. We really now need to shed the fear that our rupee will have a run and open the bond market, because till we are able to attract foreign capital at the low interest rates available globally, our dreams to develop the infrastructure will just not take wings. And it's in India, this money invested, for every dollar invested in infrastructure, the returns will be multiple. Unlike in China at this point of time, any money invested in infrastructure, a dollar invested is probably going to get less than 10 cents in return. Important point to note. While yesterday the global media was talking about vaccine diplomacy being carried on by China and Russia, we have a report here by Indrani Bagchi. Vaccine diplomacy. India says Bangladesh to be priority recipient. But what is important here is India has convinced Bangladesh to stay away from trials of Chinese vaccine. And that's an extremely important victory and step, and actually a safety mechanism for Bangladesh too. Great work for our diplomats. Then another news, first rockets produced by private sector successfully test fired. That's important. I guess this is, the developing of the defense ecosystem, defense production ecosystem, at least in the space of missiles and in rockets, we seem to be doing okay. Now let's talk about China. There was a video that was put out by one of my colleagues. It was a slick video, a promotional video that bought into kind of connected three dots, which is the B-52 bombers being moved to Diego Garcia, the stealth bomber, the exercise conducted by the American Navy with the Indian Navy, and made it sound like a promotional foreign policy coup for India, for Indian diplomacy. While there is some truth in it, it's not the entire truth. Because if you look at what's been happening, there are three nuclear carriers in the East China Sea. One of them peeled away and did an exercise with us in the Andaman Sea. Unfortunately, India did not go to town about it, did not overplay it, in fact underplayed it, and did not get the necessary leg up that it could have got had it publicized it much more and accepted it much more. The B-52 bombers and the stealth bombers that have now positioned themselves between in the Diego Garcia and Guam had more to do, as far as the American press is saying, with Taiwan. But there is there's a coming together of a confluence of objectives between India and the United States. What India does is important for the United States in its defense with Taiwan. What the US does for defending Taiwan plays an important role in India's action against China. This is absolutely the right moment of intersection for India. It's a moment that we cannot lose. What is important here is to realize, has this government acted decisively? The proof of the pudding will be on what we do in Galwan, in that border. Right now, most of the steps that are being taken by us, whether it is, sometimes you can't understand them. Lieutenant General meeting, Major Generals meetings that in Congress. I mean, we are on the back foot. MEA meeting the PLA, again, really makes no sense. So there's no cohesion in what we are doing. I mean, I don't know whether we are trying to confuse the Chinese or we are confused ourselves. There has to be a lot more clarity on the ground in what we are doing than what there currently is, which is important. The other thing I'd like to point out is that, when we analyze what we are doing and whether we should take action, we focus too much on our weaknesses. And we overemphasize China's strengths. And that's not going to get us anywhere. It just makes us into what I call a freeze scared mode, a freeze frame. And we are unable to take the kind of decisions we need to at this point of time to take on China. What we should be actually doing is actually focusing on China's weaknesses and identifying our comparative strengths to take action. That will free us of this fear mongering that's being spread around that, China is so much ahead. That's a part of what China does. It's doing it to the world that, if anybody does anything to China, the world will collapse. Nothing like that will happen. Absolutely nothing. Now, we know what our weaknesses are. The economy, the COVID, and the army, which is being underfunded for years. But let's see what our advantages are. Our advantages are a sweet spot as far as our diplomacy is concerned. Major countries in our corner are in our corner. China allowed the COVID to spread, destroying millions of lives, millions of economies, and the world actually is not at all with them. As they say, the global backlash is what is in play. India's leadership at who should be used to at the WHO should actually play into our hands and be used to unearth the truth, and that should start sending shivers down China's backs. And Dr. Harshvardhan should stop pussyfooting around and do something of worth as far as the WHO is concerned. Let's face it, Air Force has superior assets, it has a superior geography, and it is in a position at this point of time to be able to destroy. Just think about the supply chain that the Chinese army has. It's just one road and one railway line that probably connects the Tibet Valley to the mainland. If your Air Force comes into play, that becomes a sitting duck target. They don't have the necessary heavy lift capacity and capability of that size like the United States to actually be able to reinforce its forces in Ladakh, especially if the US is putting pressure on them in the South China Sea. The other is the Navy. India definitely has a huge advantage with all these, and especially now with the force multipliers of the Australian Navy and the US Navy in the Pacific Ocean and the Andaman Sea. Indian P-81s and submarine detecting facilities of the United States will be making life hell for Chinese submarines. And their assets, above sea assets, are not what they're made up to be. Aircraft carrier is an old refurbished one from Ukraine, something like ours, but with a far less capability and far less experience running and maintaining the carrier. Even their naval pilots don't have the kind of experience India has. See that as a huge advantage. And think about it this way. The Navy controls the Indian Ocean. If it was to make life difficult for the supply chain of China, look at the kind of economy, the economic problems that China could face. So India has a huge advantage in both Air Force and the Navy. Now, what is the other great advantage we have? Is our soldiers. Our soldiers are far tougher. They've faced far tougher. They're made of far tougher metal. They're forced to far harder times. The Chinese, as they say, anecdotal evidence, use these vehicles to traverse. Indian soldiers do it on foot, and they have been manning those borders 24/7, 12 months of the year. The Chinese, on the other hand, currently have got their own, have got these rotational troops that have been induced by promises of more money, of jobs, of education, to actually come and spend 4 months in this area. They are the ones who are going to be forced to fight. Now imagine what a great advantage the Indian foot soldier has at this point of time. Now, what else do we have? We are going to put into play Taiwan. We can put into play Tibet on the diplomatic front. That should cause a whole bunch of grief for China. What are China's weaknesses? Here's a quick rundown on China's weaknesses. China most likely run into a Vietnam syndrome when body bags start going home, because it's a princeling army. It's most of the soldiers are one-child families. A loss of one family creates a crisis in a family that has grandparents and has only one son that they have because of the one-child policy. Also has a weakening economy, has domestic problems galore, especially with Hong Kong, which they've been forced. They're also overreacted. They've opened too many fronts. They've got Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South China Sea, Philippines falling out, Myanmar also now disenchanted, Central Asia now also getting restless, especially Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, as are Russia with the Sinicization of Siberia. They don't have a very happy situation. They have now a trade war, which has moved into technology war and is moving into finance. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will be a telling blow, because of what China has been used to, using Hong Kong as a free trade hub for many activities, and almost funding up to 70% of their IPOs and their industrial activity. There's weakness in the CPEC, because part of it goes through India. The other problem is Balochistan, and Balochistan is restive, and it's something that China will be held to pay, and they know it. There's an exodus out of China, has dramatically picked up. 15,000 millionaires have migrated overseas last year. There are 450,000 companies that have shut down post-COVID. 25,000 foreign companies have not applied for renewing their licenses. Supply chain exit is speeding up, causing more unemployment. As you also know, there is a move afoot between India, Australia and Japan to accelerate this further, to move the supply chains into India. Then Hong Kong, as I said, was used as a source of foreign capital and money laundering shop for Chinese leadership, using the FTA between HK and USA, now being shuttered. That's a huge problem. Now here's another problem. It seems that the People's Bank of China lost 1 trillion supporting the dollar peg, and other banks lost $500 billion. The FX reserves hence may be less than 2 trillion versus the much touted 3 trillion. These reserves support a domestic debt of 36 trillion and a foreign debt of 5 trillion, folks. These foreign exchanges, don't take them as, as a equation of economic power, because it really is not. It could be a albatross around their neck. The other thing, China has invested 5 trillion in debt of sovereign borrowers. Most of these borrowers could go belly up in this COVID-induced recession, a COVID-induced recession by them. Then you have it. The main point that you need to know, does not have formal allies, and it does not have deep bilateral relationships with any heavy-hitting state that it can lean on for vocal international support. Pakistan, Iran, Turkey are hardly heavy-hitting, and Russia, in my view, is going to sit this out. This is an perfect time, actually, folks. Perfect time for India to make a call. If India takes decisive action, just remember 1962. Mao did it to hurt India, to teach India a lesson, but more importantly, to take the leadership of the developing world away from Nehru, which they kind of did, at least the communist world. For at this point of time, if India was to hit China hard militarily, forget all the action in terms of economics, etc., because that's all just fluff. If it was to do it militarily, because she only understands Mao's logic of power from the barrel of the gun, India could do what China did to it and probably galvanize the rest of the developing world and middle powers to accord India a place on the high table. The timing is right.